Hello, and welcome to the Hobo CEO podcast, where we're talking all things business and entrepreneurship, including the highs and lows, with a sprinkle of neurodiversity for good measure. I'm your host, Shay Wassell, neurodivergent serial entrepreneur, personal and business coach, author, researcher, and most importantly, a mother to one beautiful little human being. This podcast is all about sharing the entrepreneurial journey, as well as tips, tricks, and advice from my guests to help you become the business owner and entrepreneur you've always imagined you could be. And you definitely can be that person. But before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the beautiful lands on which I live and work, the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I pay my respects to elders past, present, and to all First Nations people that are listening today. So let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Hobo CEO podcast. And today I'm really excited to be talking to Jamie, who we met, like a lot of my clients, a lot of my podcast interviewers through LinkedIn. And Jamie has been working in the ADHD space. And so I thought it would be great to bring him on the show today because the Hobo CEO is all about neurodivergent entrepreneurship, which Jamie is very well versed in. And we're hoping we might also send this across to the Dear Dyslexic podcast. So if you're listening to one of the either shows, welcome. And I'd also like to welcome Jamie today.
Thank you. Hey, Shay, how you doing?
I am good, and I'm really excited to hear you up north near my sister, actually. I love it outside of Byron Bay. It's such a beautiful area. It's very calming, which is why I think my sister doesn't want to move back to Melbourne anytime soon.
Yeah, it's a lovely lifestyle here.
You've had a bit of an interesting career and getting to where you are now in your entrepreneurial journey. Would you like to share a little bit of your story with us?
Sure. Where could I start? I think, my first career was actually in sports. I was a tennis player, which I can go into if that's of any interest. But yeah, after quitting tennis, I went to business school in Melbourne at RMIT and got a job at a tech company. And it was just, right place, right time. Not too long later, I relocated to San Francisco with that company to set up their US operations. And yeah, it was cool to be in that environment. The company grew quite quickly, so I had a lot of opportunity and was learning quite fast. And I sort of started to acquire small internet businesses and sell them, and then started my own brokerage company in 2017, headquartered out of San Francisco. And then pretty shortly after, actually moved to Mexico to learn Spanish and surf and enjoy the freedom of running a location independent business. And so running that company, during the years that I ran that company, we helped over 400 entrepreneurs sell their companies. So that was really cool exposure and experience. And since then, I've had a few other projects in the software space. Yeah, and I guess if I look at my journey of entrepreneurship, ADHD has been a really big part of it in a positive way, but also, in a really challenging way as well. So my sort of career has been sort of like marked by three burnout at different stages of my career. One, as I mentioned, as a tennis player on the pro circuit, and then twice in entrepreneurship. And all three burnouts were pretty significant. Yeah. When I was living in Mexico, I was sort of, the business was doing well, so it sort of took me by surprise. But I ended up stepping down as CEO and taking a 6-month hiatus and going back to the small town of Alice Springs in the center of Australia, where I grew up, to live with mum and just be and garden and meditate and heal, essentially. So I think ADHD's had a lot to do with my entrepreneurial journey, and it's why I specialize in working with entrepreneurs that have ADHD or struggle with ADHD symptoms.
I have to write these things down so they don't float quickly out of my head as you're talking, because there are a couple of points I was really interested in. One, I think anyone listening who's an entrepreneur or working in this space, our ideal would be to have I wouldn't say surfing is my ideal, but a beach lifestyle where you've got, you're not tied down to an office. So it sounds like for me, that is the ultimate dream, is to be able to, work anywhere, have clients around the world and not be tied down as such. So how does that lead to burnout, do you think?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think really, it was really surprising because, I grew up like thousands of kilometers away from the ocean, and, to be living in the beach in Mexico and running this successful company, everything seemed to be going well. It was really the relationship. If I look at all three burnouts, the common theme was sort of the relationship I had with myself. So, I've done a bunch of different therapies over the years, but the one that I'm really obsessed with at the moment is internal family systems. And it's all based around parts theory. And I find it a really helpful model to understand that we're made up of lots of different parts. And our sort of, our higher consciousness is the self that, governs all of these parts. But often we get completely absorbed or hijacked by one of these parts that's trying to protect, vulnerable parts of ourselves. And, being a kid with ADHD, as a child, I spent a lot of time on home suspension and rather than in the classroom because I was a very hyperactive kid. So, I really struggled through school. And, just reflecting on my first burnout as a tennis player, tennis was one of the things I enjoyed. And so, although I was struggling in the classroom, I could really hyper-focus on tennis. And I didn't know this at the time, but what I was experiencing was a flow state. So the chaos and clutter in my mind would just disappear and I would be in my body. And, I was in that sort of altered state of consciousness where everything sort of felt effortless and decisions and actions just seemed to flow. And when I think about and I think what happened there is I received this sponsorship opportunity, which was more like an investment. And the deal was that this very wealthy person would fund all the expenses of travel and competing and training in exchange for a 10% cut of any prize money that I won. And so it was an investment in, I was a 16-year-old kid, but if I made it, to the big leagues, he would see a return on his investment. And it alleviated a lot of financial pressure on, mum, who was a single mother, but it put a lot of pressure on me. And almost from that moment, a bunch of other things happened. I dropped out of school and started, finished my education in the hotel rooms between training and matches. So I had to manage myself, and it was almost like the punishment and reward system of the classroom was now my responsibility, and I had to sort of manage myself. So that was really hard. And then just the pressure of having to perform, just tennis wasn't fun anymore. And I would start to, and so back to parts theory, and I talk about sort of my higher self and my lower self. I call the higher self sort of my general, who sort of sets the strategy and sets the vision. And, all entrepreneurs can relate to this. And then, you have what I call sort of my workhorse, which is, the part of me that actually has to get up and do the work, get onto the training court or sit behind the computer and draft up the newsletter or whatever it is. And there was such a disconnect between these two parts of myself where, my higher self wanted to be reach the ultimate goal tomorrow and, had very little compassion or understanding for, workhorse me that was actually having to get up and do the work. And, I talk a lot about the carrot and stick as the punishment and reward system that we use. So I was dangling the carrot of reward that I'll one day be happy and, punishing myself with the discipline stick. And I think what that does is, it brings you're either reflecting on past events or you're projecting into the future, and it really takes you out of the present moment, which of course is what you need to be able to enter a flow state. So I was never really in my body and in the moment at tennis. And the same thing happened with work as well. I got overly ambitious and I stopped enjoying the journey essentially. And so those two parts were in conflict, and eventually it got so bad that they had a divorce and I snapped and I burnt out.
I like that. They had a divorce. Thank you for sharing that, because I think, it can seem like one of the advantages of ADHD is that hyperfocus and that flow, and that's how we get things done. And I felt that when I was doing my doctorate, when my mum was dying, that for me, my flow was actually, even though I've got a writing difficulty, that was my safe space. And that's where I knew I could just be in the present moment, focusing on one thing. And that enabled me to kind of cut out everything else that was happening around me, all the chaos. So you can just focus in on that one thing. But it was interesting that you said before about the healing as well, going home to heal, because I know when I had my first mental health episode, that I went home to heal as well. And it was my mum that was really, the enabler of that healing. And so to hear you talk about going home to your mum and having that time to heal, because we don't often get that space to heal. We have to just keep going. So
mums are the best. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think, the mind can sort of trick you into thinking you're doing okay, or that, you just need to keep suffering a little bit longer, enduring or persist, and then you'll be happy. And if you don't listen to your body for long enough, you will, you can burn out or, have a mental breakdown essentially.
Or your back can go out.
Yeah.
Your body starts telling you that you're not looking after yourself well. And so when you transitioned into your current work that you're doing now, which is supporting entrepreneurs who have ADHD. And do you see similar traits that they go through, or similar situations that you've experienced, particularly that burnout? There's a lot of research around burnout within the autistic community, but there seems to be less around the ADHD community and even less around the dyslexic community. And we co-occur so frequently. But what have you found within the cohort of people that you're working with?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. So I think, there seems to be, I don't know what the data is on this, but there seems to be a very high concentration of entrepreneurs and creatives that have some form of neurodivergence. And my theory around that is simply that the classroom or the workplace or these sort of systems they're not designed for the way that we work. And so it's uncomfortable enough for us in those systems that we push ourselves to create our own worlds that we can exist in, in a more flowy way. And so, I think the challenge with being an entrepreneur or a creative or any self-led practice is that we have to manage ourselves. We are our own boss. And we often leave the workplace because we don't want to work for a boss anymore, only to realize that, we beat ourselves and starve ourselves half to death with the discipline stick and the carrot. So, we can often be pretty harsh on ourselves. And so I'd say that's a pretty common thread along all of the people that I've worked with in this space. And I'd say the added layer of difficulty for entrepreneurs with ADHD is obviously the executive dysfunction of, there's impulsiveness, there's, attention issues, there's procrastination, there's, organizing the clutter in the mind, disorganization. So, there's lots of moving parts of a business. You're managing people, you're managing systems and processes, you're managing yourself. And so that can become pretty difficult. And then another thing is, particularly hyperactive ADHD is we're quite restless. And so, the motor doesn't switch off at the end of the day. And we often feel, especially if we've been distracted and we haven't got the one thing that we needed to get done that day, you kind of finish your day feeling dissatisfied and like you just can't switch off. And so what happens is, it's a bit of a cycle, but you're not sleeping well. And so you sort of, the connection between sleep deprivation and burnout is pretty significant alone. So, I would say a common theme is, I think another statistic, which I'm probably going to get wrong, so I'm just going to do a rough number, but, I think before we get to high school as ADHDers, we've received like significantly more rejection. And so, I think there's a lot of negative self-talk, and going back to that higher self and lower self, the higher self that's got all these ambitious goals can be pretty harsh to the one that has to get up in the morning and figure out what to do that day and execute.
At Rethink Dyslexia, we are doing things differently. As a global leader in creating inclusive environments for adults with dyslexia, our commitment is to provide individuals with opportunities to live healthier, happier, and more connected lives. Through our range of tailored services, including coaching, learning and development programs, consultancy, and training, we're helping dyslexic individuals, businesses, and organisations to better understand and support their dyslexic employees. So if you're looking for insights, inspiration, and expert advice on dyslexia and how you can provide inclusive practices and environments, then head to rethinkdyslexia.com to find out more, or book your free consultation today. Yes. Yeah, I can see that across all the different neurodivergences that, yeah. And as you're talking, I'm nodding yes, because getting your brain to switch off at the end of the day is just so hard. Are there strategies that you talk to your clients about around ways that work? I'm probably going to reel off 5 that everyone knows about, but are there other ones outside of exercise, trying to get good sleep, eating well, meditating? Are there other ones that you talk to your clients about, or are they kind of the key things that's really, looking after our physical?
There's some great pillars, aren't there? Whenever something in my life just feels like it's off track, I always go back to nutrition, sleep, and exercise. That's like the triad for me, the 3 pillars. But yeah, there's so many different sort of interventions and things that you can do depending on, what you're sort of struggling with. Because I think a lot of the time we focus on the symptoms of focus or inattentiveness or procrastination or avoidance. And often it's about trying to find the underlying cause. So one of the first things that I always do with people that I'm working with is first I would say that flow is sort of the objective for me personally. After my 3rd burnout, I was like, burnout sucks. ADHD is hard. What is the opposite of burnout? And for me, the simplest answer to that is flow. And so flow can mean that, that what I was talking about experiencing on the tennis court, which is that altered state of consciousness. But if you look at the meaning of flow more historically, through, the ancient Greeks called it enthusiasmos. You've got Taoist monks and Zen Buddhists also referring to, they have different words for it, but they're talking about this experience of flow. It's much more holistic, and it's actually looking at, the synchronicity and harmonization of life, in general. So your personal life can often, my 3rd burnout had nothing to do with work performance. I was crushing it at work, and I'd actually figured out the neuroscience and biohacking of getting into a flow state consistently and getting my focus and really excelling at work. But things fell apart in my personal life because things weren't flowing there. And so basically I encourage clients to basically do an audit of their life, from like personal relationships to professional relationships to, the way they've structured their business. Often as we grow a business, we can sort of find ourselves getting further and further away from the things that we actually love doing in our business, and we end up being an operator or an administrative worker, and we're not actually doing the flowy activities that are, as Mihai Csikszentmihalyi would call, autotelic, which means the action becomes the reward in and of itself. So, and why that's so significant to me is because when I learnt this, I realized I don't need the stick and carrot to push me towards my goal. They're extrinsic. They're outside of myself, ways of motivating myself to achieve my goals. And that, my experience time and time again, has meant suffering for future reward, essentially. And when you're doing things that are in flow and in alignment, it's intrinsically rewarding. You just love doing it. And anyone that's got ADHD and other neurodivergences, neurotypical people as well, when we're doing things we love, time dilates, the day goes quickly, we're energized and we're happy. And so instead of looking at, I guess, flow or treating any of these symptoms as things we need to add to our life, I'm always looking at what we need to remove. So if you think of, I like to think of myself as like a river flowing, and when there's boulders blocking, in my river, blocking the water from being able to flow down its natural course, I want to look at what those boulders are essentially, and how do we remove those? So, I see it more as like, we really focus on harnessing like our own individual flow, whatever that means, and making sure that everything in your life aligns to you essentially. And that's how you sort of unlock your superpower.
Yes. Yeah, I think it is too. And as you were talking, I was thinking, how do we, as people that work with neurodivergence, and that's our business, how do we support people to try and, remove those boulders? Because it is so hard when we've got so much going on, isn't it? When you're trying to balance your personal life, your work life, you're trying to manage your difference so that it doesn't impact you. So it's like, how do we, and I don't know if there's any answer, but you might have an answer, but it's like, how do you support people to try and remove those boulders so that we do get into a state of flow?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first step is identifying what the boulder is. So, asking the right questions to help that person identify. And often those boulders can be quite scary. If you've built a business and it's you've grown it and you've spent 10 years doing it, and the boulder is the business that you've built, or the customer that you serve. Maybe you don't feel passionate about the customer that you're serving anymore. You don't feel proud about the mission of the business anymore. Maybe you're more your passion is in climate change and you're selling ice cream, or helping over 400 entrepreneurs exit their business. I've had a lot of difficult conversations with people about what is their purpose and how do we align that. And sometimes the answers to those questions can be really scary. So I think creating a safe space for them to explore that and remind them that you don't have to make any scary decisions. You're totally in control. But yeah, I guess probing them and really challenging them on, well, what does actually make you happy? I think a lot of people think about the trophy they're going to get, and they attach their sort of well-being and fulfillment around getting to the top of their mountain and getting that trophy. And what I've seen time and time again from people that have sold their companies for millions and millions of dollars and achieved financial freedom, which was their trophy, is that that's often not the case at all. And so, I would say the first step is really just helping them identify. And usually what you'll come up against is a lot of assumptions and limiting beliefs and blind spots that they haven't tested. And so just sort of, so I'll give you an example of a client who is super creative, one of the most creative people I've ever met. And, he's got an amazing fashion label. He designs these incredible suits. He's headlined fashion shows. He's designed suits for celebrities. And he had a very strong idea of how he wanted to grow the business. And he really wanted to manufacture his suits in-house. And so he set up this big manufacturing, warehouse in Indonesia. And he had 10 employees out of there. And what happened was he went from being this like flowy creative to a production manager. And he was completely miserable, and things were, and it was so far out of his strength, so far out of his passion. And the answer to me was obvious: close down the factory and get someone else to do it. But that felt like such a massive step back for him that it took, a little while, not too long, 4 or 5 months to really wrestle with that idea before he realized that actually that's a step forward for me, because I'm back in my flow. Whoever's good at doing production management is doing that part of the business, and I can focus on the creative side of the business. So he removed his boulder. It was a big boulder to move, but it's made a significant difference to not only how the business is performing, because he's got a lot more time to design and be in front of the camera, creating really cool, advertising campaigns, but his personal life's significantly better as well. He has a lot more time and space, and he's less stressed and exhausted.
So it's a challenge trying to do all things, because you do lose your spark. And what happens when you move a boulder? Like, I find that, we achieve something, but then we don't have time to process the achievement, and then we go on to that next kind of thing that we're working towards to get to the top of the mountain, and you never have the space to either clear the boulder or to acknowledge the boulder that you've gotten over.
Well, this is the thing. I think if you picture yourself sort of trudging up this hill with a big backpack on, and it's like a number of different projects, some of which probably aren't actually tied, aren't the quickest way of getting to the top of the mountain, but you're juggling those projects anyway. And I ask the question, what if there's a river winding through the mountains? What if you don't even need to walk up the mountain at all? Like, what if there's another way of getting to your destination that is just following the natural course of the river, which is you just being in flow? What could that look like? And I think the simplest way that I can describe how to figure that out is to really, when you're flowing down a river, you're almost being pulled towards your destination rather than pushing uphill. So what are the things that are pulling you? Like, when you put your energy into something, what's coming back? Whether it's a relationship or an employee or a business partner or a customer type or a way you've structured your business, if there's a repetitive recurring task that you keep doing and it just zaps your energy every time, then we need to figure out how to automate or outsource or just remove it entirely. And so really, again, just back to mind and body, stop listening to the yappy mind in the head that's going, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. That's just anxiety. And really tapping into the somatic experience of how that feels in your body and whether that feels good. I really think it's that simple. And I'm sure lots of people would like to challenge me on that. And give lots of really hard examples where it's like, well, I want to do this, but, and I can't. But, my clients challenge me on this every single day. They push back and say, well, I just can't do that. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, after a little while of really probing and challenging them, they do find a way to jump in the canoe and cruise down the river.
I really love that metaphor. I think that's the right word I've used. About instead of trying to climb the hill, go down the river, go with the flow.
Totally.
It's such a nice, such a better way of thinking about everything, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah. And I think about my tennis career. I mean, I was so young, but, the moment that I stopped enjoying playing tennis, I should have stopped. Really, I should have stopped. I mean, when I did stop, I was so burnt out that I didn't pick up a racket for 10 years. But I wonder what would have happened if I had stopped. Or if I had have said, look, this sponsorship's great, but it's just too much pressure for me. Or if I just had a conversation with the investor and said, I'm really scared. I mean, when I look back on it now, he was just a rich philanthropist that loved tennis. And it was like betting on horses. It probably wasn't as big of a deal as I'd made up in my head. But really identifying what the thing is that is blocking you from flow and just trying to remove it or make it smaller or at least address it and have a conversation with it, whatever that is.
Well, I think at the young age you were for tennis, it was probably made more sense for you to respond in that way because you didn't have the ability. As you get older, you have the ability to reflect on and you have different skill sets to manage high-pressure situations.
You do. The irony is that adults experience significantly less flow than kids do. So as we accumulate more sort of autonomy, we also accumulate a lot more responsibility, and we sort of put a lot of pressure on ourselves. So I've played the role of that investor consistently throughout my life, whether it's a deadline to publish my book or a revenue target for my company or, so yeah, it is a really interesting one, but yes, it is helpful to be older and to be a little bit more self-aware than I was when I was younger, for sure.
Well, I think that's a hard expectation to place on any 16-year-old in playing pro tennis, isn't it? It's such a small minority of people that have that opportunity. It's amazing that you had that and that you got to that level. Yeah,
it was amazing of my mum, really, to a lot of parents wouldn't let their kid drop out of school. And, it also taught me that, I really struggled in the classroom, but I had online tutors for some of my subjects, and I could sit when I had that one-on-one attention, I was able to learn from them. And so, it's interesting, and I've learned a lot through that first experience in terms of the way that I navigated uni and how I navigate work projects and manage myself, body doubling, working with coaches one-on-one, which is more expensive than group coaching, but it just works better for me. So I do it.
What are some other strategies that help you?
Yeah. So, focus is a really big topic, obviously. So, and it's almost like I would say, I get a bit self-conscious because I feel like I'm just rattling off very typical sort of productivity tools, Cal Newport's book on deep work or Atomic Habits or anything like that. But yeah, it's almost like I look at these things and they almost work for me, but because of my ADHD, I just need to tweak them a little bit. But, really basic stuff like, a lot of my clients, I'll talk about time blocking and calendaring and planning. And they'll go, oh, I hate sticking to plans. I hate having time blocks. I can never stick to them. And then you go, okay, why can't you stick to these? And they'll sort of explain. And it's usually the higher self, again, that has a completely unrealistic idea of what is achievable in a day. And often a to-do list is sort of written down in like bullet points. And so you can't visualize that. It's not tangible in terms of how much time it's going to take or whether that task has been broken down. So it's almost like, actually, even though we resist a lot of structure, I think we actually strive. We thrive in structure. And it's almost like I'm teaching when it comes to sort of focus and attention and sort of eliminating procrastination and getting traction and momentum. A lot of what I'm doing is sort of just sitting with them a little bit longer for them to just sort of figure it out, and just like, they'll set up their calendar and their to-do list and they'll feel like they failed, and they'll go, I did 30% of the things that I said I would do. And I go, okay, Wyatt, let's have a look at what you did. Oh, you've said you're going to do a half an hour task that took you 6 hours. Okay, maybe we need to be a bit more realistic about that. And so it's almost like when you're constantly setting yourself up for failure, you're reinforcing this sort of narrative that I can't stick to time blocks and I can't do Pomodoro timers and things like that. So that's a really big thing that I work with. In terms of some basic strategies, I think, bulk batching, so my day looks like, a typical day is like, I'll wake up, I'll do my morning routine, which is a bunch of things I do to like regulate myself. So it's a bit of physical exercise, it's some stretching, some meditating. Sometimes it's journaling. If I'm feeling restless, I will just talk into my phone on an AI transcriptor. And then the first 4 hours of my day, like, I don't touch my phone. No one can contact me until about midday. So that's sort of like my time. And that's the only time where I can expect to get any actual work done that requires problem solving or creativity, essentially. And so I just, if I switch out that morning block to go surfing or to have phone calls with clients or whatever, I just know that I'm not going to get anything done on my to-do list that is related to that, essentially. And so it's almost like when I'm explaining this, it's like, that's my higher self being really kind and compassionate and understanding what it's like for my lower self on the day. And so I think that's really the biggest thing, is getting those two parts of yourself to work together, where the ambitious part of you is like, I want to do these things, and teaching your lower self to go, but hang on, like, that's not, you've just set me 16 hours of work and I can only work 6 hours today. And actually 3 hours of that work requires deep work. And I'm not going to be able to do that in the afternoon because I will have checked my phone, I will have checked my email, I will have eaten some food, and I'm probably not going to be able to get back into that zone and do that work. So we're going to have to bump that to Thursday or next week. And I think a lot of the hardest thing for me is like, I struggle with analysis paralysis a lot. And so I'll often, like, if I wasn't overwhelmed or anxious, I would probably be like already 2 or 3 times more productive. The amount of time I used to spend planning and replanning things rather than basically procrastinating rather than doing the thing. And I realized it was because my higher self wasn't supporting me enough. I wasn't like breaking down tasks and writing, and really considering what the day or the week ahead looks like. So, even if I go on a holiday and I get back on a Sunday, like, I'm not going to set myself really deep, hard work on the Monday or the Tuesday, because it's going to take me a little time to recalibrate and get into the week. So it just comes down to sort of that foreplanning, which an ADHD would say, I'm terrible at this, but it's a skill and a muscle you can build over time.
It is a muscle you can build over time. But I like what you said. So I want to check, this is what you were talking about. So when you said in the morning you do things to regulate yourself.
Yep.
So is that because with ADHD comes, and I think this is for all neurodivergents, the self-regulation can be really difficult, and emotional regulation can be difficult at times too, particularly when we're under pressure. So does that for you kind of set up your day so mentally you're feeling good within yourself, and that you feel like you can manage your emotions and manage that self-regulation a bit better?
Totally. So yeah, I'm less in my mind and more in my body, because I've connected with my body. I've done some journaling at some point, so I've given the yappy anxiety a bit of a voice, and then it's like, okay. And the other thing I will have done the night before is I will have planned out the next day. So I know what I'm doing in that first block of time in the day. Like, I don't look at my to-do list and then depending on how I'm feeling, pick something. It's like it's already chosen. So all I have to do is sit down and do it. And if I've chosen well, it's a good day. If my higher self has set me up for a good day, it's great.
And what happens if your higher self has done you wrong? Should that lead to chaos? Internal chaos?
Yeah. I mean, I'll rebel against it often. I won't do it. And I'll either have a shame complex about it, or if I'm catching myself and super self-aware, I'll go, oopsie, I didn't do a good job of planning today, and it's okay, I didn't sleep well last night. I mean, that's the other thing. If I have a terrible sleep, I'll redesign my day in the next day. If I have less than 6 hours sleep, I'll skip my deep work session, because there's no point me sitting there, struggling to write something that would take me, half as long if I was well slept. So I'll just switch out. I'll just go, okay, I'm going to have to bump some stuff back, and I'm just going to do some light tasks in the morning, or I might even just take the morning off. So I'm very in tune with, I'm not externalizing. I'm not looking at my business as like, the business needs this. The business is, it serves me. It's supposed to serve me. And so and I'm a really important asset to my business. I tell my clients, you are the most important asset for your business. So, look after yourself. And so I from a performance perspective, I'm always trying to regulate my energy, essentially, which is a really big change from when I was younger as a tennis player, and then a young man in San Francisco trying to, I work 15 hours a day and I can do it day in, day out sort of thing. I've got a very different approach to it now.
I love that statement, regulating energy, because I love to have a nap, and it drives everyone insane, especially if we're on holidays. I have to have a nap, and everyone thinks it's so lazy. But I love that. You're regulating your energy, and I can regulate. Once I've had a break like that, I'm much more energized. I can function better.
Napping's a superpower if you can do it. That's amazing.
It's my superpower. It just frustrates everyone else.
It's so cool that you can nap. Yeah, I do these. If you struggle to nap during the day, so the way my motor works is it takes me a little while to get going, and then it just sort of increases with momentum throughout the day. And it takes me 3 hours from the moment I get into bed to when I fall asleep. Usually, it takes a really long time for my motor work to wind down. But what I try to do to get the same benefits of a nap is I do a non-sleep deep rest protocol, an NSDR, which Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist, I think he coined it, but it's just a 10-minute sort of similar to yin yoga in a way, but it's just a way of, it's like a deep meditative state, and there's lots of different clips on YouTube or Spotify that you can use for that.
I think I'm just sorry, as you're talking, Andrew, is it the Huberman show?
Andrew Huberman show, yeah.
Huberman Lab?
Huberman Lab, yeah.
Yeah, I've just been listening. Unfortunately, it's not neurodivergent friendly. So the ADHD and how to improve focus, because it's 2 hours long. So that would be my only feedback to him. But I've been trying to listen to his ADHD one at the moment around improving focus. He's got some really interesting stuff. I really like following him at the moment. So to sidetrack us, but it is a really good resource for those listening.
Totally.
Because he has a whole mix of things around well-being and physical well-being and eating well. And yes, sorry, I sidetracked us completely.
No, that's okay. But yeah, again, with the way that I structure my day as well, I fast in the morning. That's a nutritional choice, and then I don't have carbs during the day. I have carbs at dinner. I fast till midday, and then I break my fast with fiber and protein. But I noticed that if I have carbs, and this is just for me personally, I'm not a dietitian, I'm not giving advice to anyone else, but I just think about the things that I'm always trying to connect with how I'm feeling energetically, and designing my day, my life, my relationships around that, which may sound a bit self-absorbed, but yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a greater capacity to be there as a leader or a partner or a friend or a family member when I've looked after myself really well.
Well, I think it's really important. And I think with ADHD too, because sometimes it can feel like your motor is running constantly, to be able to divide your energy, because it's very energy-based condition. Hyperactivity, we're moving, fidgeting. So I think it's a nice way, a compassionate way of looking at it to support yourself.
Yeah, and I would say that a lot of the more modern Western science around flow is really helpful. I think neurodivergents are really good at flow, actually. So when we have a really strong filter, like particularly, ADHD is really struggle to focus on things that are either boring or too hard or overwhelming, or they're just not interested in. And things that are like really in alignment with their passions and whatever, they can hyper focus for they can get into really deep flow states and really for extended periods of time. So they're actually really good at it. And so I think any of the, mentioning Andrew Huberman, there's, the Flow Research Collective, there's Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, there's a lot of resources around flow that I've geeked out on for years and implemented a lot into my program that are really, really helpful for, because it's just explaining how to manipulate your biology to get into those flow states. And a lot of it really, it's very simple. One is reducing cognitive load. And our cognitive load is really high usually, or above average high. And then the other thing is just, using things like music or other kind of flow triggers that activate flow states as well. But I would say the biggest thing is actually just focusing on how to reduce cognitive load.
Yes, that's a really, really good way to wrap up, I think, is looking at how we reduce our cognitive load. And my flow state is dead silence as I've gotten older. And I think that's partly because of my dyslexia. I struggle with my writing and spelling and getting my words on paper. So for me, actually dead silence enables me to really focus. And as I get older, actually, I think when I was younger, I'd listen to music, but yeah, it doesn't help anymore. I've learned a lot today and I've loved our conversation. It's a really different perspective on not just entrepreneurship, but ADHD as well. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been fantastic learning more, and I've got some stuff on flow that I'm going to go back and look at as I look at my bookshelf.
Yeah, cool. Well, Shay, thanks so much for having me on your podcast. It was really nice to hang out and have a yarn for a while.
No, it was great. And for everyone listening, we'll have all Jamie's details on our website, and we'll tag him in all socials so that you can follow him and look at all the amazing work he's doing with entrepreneurship and ADHD. So thank you so much for your time today.
Okay, thanks, Shay. Bye.
See you. I'm Dr. Shay Wissell, and you have been listening to the Hobo CEO podcast. Head to rethinkdyslexia.com.au to find out more about today's guest speaker. To keep up to date with all of our news, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And if you haven't done so yet, go to your favourite podcast platform, subscribe, rate and review this podcast. Join me next time for another conversation on the Hobo CEO.